Operations from the month of December, Pangyong So Lake. The Indian Army has deployed new landing docks and speedboats for patrolling on the Pangyong So Lake in eastern Ladakh, matching the Chinese deployments on the lake. Now, Pangyong So Lake is an Indo-Heric lake, that is a landlocked lake located in eastern Ladakh. It lies partly in India's Ladakh region and partly in Tibet. The lake is formed from Tethys geosyncline, the Karakoram mountain ranges, which crosses Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, and India, ends at the north bank of Pangyong So. So Karakoram ends here. The lake's water is crystal clear but brackish in nature. The lake freezes during the winters, allowing some vehicular movement on it as well. Now, control of Pangyong So. Nearly two-thirds of the lake is controlled by China, with just about 45 kilometers out of the 135-kilometer long lake under Indian control. The line of actual control running north-south cuts the western part of the lake, aligned east-west. Over the years, Chinese have built motorable roads along the bank of Pangyongso. The lake has mountain spurs over Chang Chenmo range, jutting down refers at fingers. India and China have difficult understanding of where land line of actual control passes through. India has maintained that the line of actual control passes through Finger 8, which has been the site of the final military post of China. But India forces have had no active control beyond Finger 4. On the other hand, China says LAC passes through Finger 2. It has been patrolling up to Finger 4, mostly in light vehicles, and at times up to Finger 2. Now, moving on to No Money for Terror conference, the third No Money for Terror conference, ministerial conference on counter-terrorism financing was held in New Delhi, India. Now, about No Money for Terror ministerial conference, the No Money for Terror conference was started in 2018 as an initiative of government of France to focus on cooperation between countries to choke terror funding. Its aim is to provide a unique platform for participating nations and organizations to deliberate on the effectiveness of current international regimes on current counter-terrorism financing and the steps required to address the emerging challenges. In 2019, the conference was held in Australia. The focus area of the third conference were on global trends in terrorism and terrorist financing, the use of formal and informal channels of funding terrorism, emerging technologies, and terrorist financing, and requisite international cooperation to address related challenges. Moving on to the key highlights from the India's address on Afghanistan, India has urged the international community to take cognizance of the threats emerging from the regime change in Afghanistan. Previous regime change in 1990s had led to the 9/11 attacks. On terrorism, India stressed that international community should never ignore terrorist safe havens or their resources. It is important to expose the doublespeak of such elements who sponsor and support them. India has called for the need of an international watchdog on terror financing and money laundering to continuously monitor the tendencies of some countries to sponsor terrorism. On modes of terrorism financing, terrorists and terrorist groups understand the nuances of modern weapons and information technology, such as the darknet and cryptocurrency, very well. The transformation of the terrorism from dynamite and AK 47 to metaverse and virtual assets is a matter of concern for countries. Hence, each country can and must act against the part of the chain within their reach. Countries supporting terrorism, certain countries support terrorism as part of their foreign policy. They offer political, ideological, and financial support to them. There must be a cost imposed upon countries that support terrorism. Organizations and individuals that try to create sympathy for terrorists must also be isolated. Moving on to Article 4 of NATO Treaty, there was a brief scare of a wider conflict in Europe after Poland alleged Russian missiles had hit its territory. There were talks of invoking Article 4 of the NATO Treaty. Now, about the Article 4. Article 4 of the NATO Charter says that member states will consult together whenever, in opinion of any of them, territorial integrity, political independence, or security of another member is threatened. It establishes a consultation mechanism among members to exchange views and information and discuss issues prior to reaching an agreement and taking action. Member states are not obligated to act if Article 4 is invoked, although deliberations could result in a decision to take joint NATO action. Now, about Article 5. Article 5 is a collective defense clause. It states that parties to the NATO treaty agree to an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. It says that each member of NATO must take such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed forces, to restore and maintain the security of North Atlantic area. This clause has been invoked only once after the attack in United States on September 11, 2001. Moving on to India-France Defence Dialogue, the fourth India-France Annual Defence Dialogue was held recently. Now, the key takeaways from the dialogue are defense cooperation, military cooperation. The two countries discussed ways to strengthen defense industrial cooperations with focus on Make in India. They agreed that the technical groups from both countries should meet early next year and take the key cooperation issues forward. Regarding military cooperation, increasing military to military cooperations by expanding the scope of bilateral exercises also came up during the dialogue. In 2021, the navies of Quad grouping, that is India, US, Japan, and Australia, conducted maritime drills in the eastern Indian Ocean region as part of the French Navy led exercise called La Pérouse for the first time. Okay. Moving on to India, China Indian Ocean Region Forum. Now, China has convened the first China Indian Ocean Region Forum in Kunming, China. It has been organized by China International Development Cooperation Agency. Its theme was shared development, theory and practice from the perspective of blue economy. The forum was attended by high-level representatives and senior officials from 19 countries, which are Indonesia, Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, Nepal, Afghanistan, Iran, Oman, South Africa, Kenya, Mozambique, Tanzania, Seychelles, Madagascar, Mauritius, Djibouti, and Australia. Australia and Maldives have released statements stating that they did not participate officially. Now, outcomes of the forum are: the forum issued a joint press statement that noted China's proposal to establish a marine disaster prevention and mitigation cooperation mechanism between China and countries in the Indian Ocean region. So, China's plan for Indian Ocean region. The China Indian Ocean Region Forum has underlined China's stepped up interest in the Indian Ocean region, that is IOR. China is already a major trading partner for most of the countries and wherein sea route vital to China's economic interest. Now, China has already set up its first ever overseas military facility in Djibouti. Chinese military ships, tracking vessels, submarines have been visiting ports in the Indian Ocean region with greater frequency. Now, the Chinese Navy has a long term plan to deploy 6 aircraft carriers to secure China's maritime interest, and 2 of them will be based in the Indian Ocean region. Now, India's view on the China Indian Ocean Region Forum. India has viewed China's recent move in the region suspiciously, including the visit of a Chinese military tracking vessel, the Yuan Wang 5, to Sri Lanka. India sees the Indian Ocean Rim Association as an already established platform for the region, which has 23 members, including Australia and Maldives, with 10 dialogue partners, which includes China, Japan, Russia, UK, and the US. Moving on to US Inflation Reduction Act, the President of France has raised concerns over the US Inflation Reduction Act. European countries believe that the act is discriminatory to non-US companies. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act is a $430 billion package of the federal spending, tax breaks, credits, levies aimed at fighting climate change, reducing healthcare costs, and making large corporations pay their fair share in taxes. Now, key provisions of the tax include regarding healthcare, tax code, electric vehicle, tax credit. So, regarding healthcare, the tax extends expiring Medicare subsidies to 13 million Americans and aims to bring down the cost of prescription drugs for which Americans pay 2 to 3 times more than the citizens of other countries. The tax code Regarding the tax code, the act aims to make the US tax code fairer by imposing a minimum tax of 15% on America's wealthiest, most profitable corporations. Regarding electric vehicles, the act features tax credits for electric vehicles that will only apply if product is assembled in USA and majority of the components are sourced domestically or from a free trade partner. Regarding tax credit, the Act offers tax credits to build clean technology manufacturing facilities and grants for refurbishing existing auto manufacturing facilities to make zero emission vehicles. So Europe's concern about the IRA is European Union members countries fear that the IRA tax credit and subsidies to EVs and other green product makers in the US put European companies at a disadvantage. The European Union's own new plan for Fit 55 is targeting to cut CO2 emissions from car by 55% and vans by 50% by 2030 and all emissions from the car by 2035. For this, it will need to significantly increase its uptake of electric vehicles. However, IRA raises fear of automakers moving to the US. US President has said that there is room for tweaks in the IRA to make it easier for European countries to participate, and it was never intended to exclude cooperating countries. Moving on to India's view on terrorism, India has circulated a concept note at the UN Security Council. The note observed that the era of classifying terrorists as good or bad based on political convenience must end. Now, about India's view on terrorism and terrorism as a transnational threat, use of technology by terrorists. So, regarding terrorism as a transnational threat, the terrorist attack around the world, like New York, London, Mumbai, Paris, and many parts of West Asia and Africa, highlight the threat of terrorism is grave and universal, a transnational threat. Terrorism can be defeated only by collective effort of all members of the UN. Use of technology by the terrorist, the proliferation of digitalization, new emerging communications, and financing technologies have increased the risk of these technologies being used up by terrorist groups. The risk of radicalizations through internet, social media, terror financing using cryptocurrencies, and crowdfunding platforms was heightened particularly during COVID 19. The countries have also witnessed the use of unmanned aerial systems for surveillance of targets, trafficking in drugs and arms, and launching of terrorist attacks on critical infrastructures and public spaces. Suggestions by India to fight terrorism. Terrorism in all its form and manifestations must be condemned. The era of classifying terrorists as bad, not so bad, good on the basis of political convenience must end immediately. There cannot be an exceptions or justification for any act of terrorism, regardless of its motivation, location, and time of attack. Moving on to projection of soft power by India, which is a parliamentary committee report. Now, a parliamentary standing committee on external affairs has recommended that Ministry of External Affairs should prepare a policy document for projection of soft power. Now, soft power is the ability to affect others to obtain outcomes one wants through attraction, persuasion, rather than coercion or payment. A country's soft power rests on its resource of cultures, values, and policies. Now, problems in India's soft power policy. MEA is yet to put together a comprehensive statement detailing India's soft power strategy. Securing adequate funding has been a key concern for government agencies. China is estimated to spend about US $10 billion dollars a year just on its Confucius Institute and soft power promotion, whereas Indian Council for Cultural Relation and other agencies put together get around to spend 3 to 400 crores. Most of India's expenditures goes into establishment and administration. Also, government organizations face a serious threat, serious shortage of talent. Bureaucrats were not always the right pick for cultural diplomacy. Now, India's effort at building soft power have been bedwielded by coordination problems between government agencies. Bodies ranging from the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports to ICCR were conducting separate international outreach activities. Recommendations given by the parliamentary panel. The MEA should prepare a policy document on India's soft power projections, delineating India's soft power and manners in which it is being projected abroad, along with vision statement for the future. The government should take concerted efforts to get recognition of Ayurveda as a system of medicine and adopt Pharmacopoeia of India so that products can be exported as medicine. Revamp the focus, structure, and functioning of DD India for its global outreach. A system of common tourist passes for entry to multiple heritage sites as is prevalent in European countries to streamline the process and avoid long queues at sites. Enhanced annual budgetary allocation of 500 crores for ICCR for conducting India's soft power and cultural diplomacy. Creation of a coordination committee consisting of representatives from the Ministries of External Affairs, Culture, Youth and Sports Affairs, Ayush, Science and Technology to overcome the lack of coordination along multiple institutes in projecting India's soft power. That'll be it.